Right before I came on the air, I saw my buddy Andy McCarthy had posted a piece on National Review Online. The title was Trump's Muslim Immigration Ban Should Touch Off a Badly Needed Discussion. And Andy McCarthy has been pressing this point for years. He's written books about this point. As you know, he's a former assistant U.S. attorney, prosecutor of terrorists. Andy, how are you, my friend?
Mark, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great. All right, give us the gist of this.
Well, the bottom line is Islam is not merely a religion. It undoubtedly, I think it's a mistake for people on our side to say that it's not a religion, because it clearly has some tenets that would be understood in the West as spiritual and religious. But I would argue that they only make up about 10 to 15% of the doctrine. Most of it is a comprehensive, authoritarian, societal framework with its own legal code. So it's really more of a political ideology with religious elements than it is, strictly speaking, a religion. And I think if you apply religious liberty tests that are meant and were intended when they were put in the Constitution to reflect a Judeo-Christian society that respects a division between the spiritual sphere of life and the political and civic sphere of life, you really can't apply that to classical Islam, because it doesn't recognize that kind of division, and because its political program in core ways is antithetical to our constitutional system.
And other religions, some would argue, have gone through this Reformation process, where and they come out of it as religion, as a religion, as a faith, right, without governing principles, without governing aspects. And right, Islam has not done that.
Right, and I'm not hopeful that it will, Mark. I think we have to hope that it does. It's much more challenging in a way in Islam, because Muslims take the Quran to be the verbatim word of Allah communicated to Muhammad through an archangel. And, you know, the scriptures I think we're familiar with in the West, they're understood to be mediated. They're inspired, they're written by human beings, and it's a lot easier to make the argument that at least certain parts of them are reduced to their time and place and maybe not as applicable, or that they evolve over time, or our understanding of them evolves. It's much harder to make the argument that, Muhammad got it wrong, or that Allah got it wrong, or that, elements of the scripture were meant solely and only for the 7th century and not for any other time and place. It's much harder to, as they say, contextualize the Quran. But whether it can evolve or not, whether they can have a reformation or not, is really beside the point to us, as is this obsession we have to figure out what the true Islam is. Who the hell knows what the true Islam is? Muslims can't even agree on it. The point is, we have to protect the United States regardless of whether Islamic reformers succeed or not. And that means we have to have a sensible immigration policy about who we let in the country.
Can you explain to me why we would have an amendment proposed in the Senate last week that puts a pause on refugees/immigration from 33 countries that have, significant terrorist populations? Or we don't know if they do or not, but they appear to ensure first that our systems here in the United States, which are woefully poor, can properly vet people coming in here. Why would 90% of the United States Senate vote against that?
I think it's recklessly irresponsible to have voted against that, Mark. And if you're a member of the Senate, and your problem with that piece of legislation is that it singles out Muslims, and you think that it feels, even if you can't say why, that it somehow violates the Constitution, the better approach would be to cut off all immigration until we can fix the system, which everybody...
And that's what it did. That was the whole point of the amendment.
No, I mean all immigration across the board, Muslim or non-Muslim, all immigration. It would be better for the country to have a pause in all immigration than it would be to continue doing what we're doing now.
Which we have. I just want to make it clear real fast, Andy.
Yeah.
That has happened in numerous instances in American history, as I've pointed out in my books, as a matter of fact. That has happened in numerous instances in American history.
Right. And I agree with that. And who couldn't agree with it? It's a fact. But the point is that if your problem is this imaginary thing like we can't make classifications in our immigration policy, which is ludicrous and defies history as well. But if that's your problem, if your theory is that it would violate the Constitution to single out Muslims, I say fine. Then don't have any immigration across the board until we fix a system that, Rubio and Graham and all these people who are the reformers all told us is a broken system that needs to be reformed. All right, well then let's cut off all immigration and then you reform it and get back to us when it's fixed.
Let's stop right. That's an important point. You said, and correctly, that they want comprehensive immigration reform. Let's play their game, because they say the system is broken. It's not. It can't be repaired. So it needs to be fundamentally altered. And you're saying, well, this is the system you're now relying on for these refugees, and you just voted against this amendment.
Right, that you said is broken, that you say is not effectively enforcing the law. Another thing that's just stupefying to me is that never once in this debate, Mark, other than when people like us talk about it, have I heard anybody point out that the burden of proof in immigration is on the immigrant to show that he is suitable and likely to be a benefit to our society, rather than on the United States to prove that you should not be let in. Immigration is a discretionary act of a government, and no one has a right to immigrate here. But you listen to all this commentary today, you wouldn't know that it's the immigrant that has the burden to show that he should be allowed in. It's not supposed to be incumbent on the country to prove that we need to keep people out, and particularly when we're in a time of, number one, terrorist assault, and number two, in a time when it's clear that we don't have an effective vetting system for immigrants. I don't understand why that's not, a point at the top of the list.
It's interesting to me, and I know you've endorsed Ted Cruz for president. You're not necessarily a fan of Trump, and yet Trump brings this up, and you make the point. I've made the point before too, but you made the point beautifully today. Why don't we debate this subject? Why don't we debate Islam? Why don't we debate what we're actually having to deal with? What are we talking about gun control? What are we talking about these lists and everything else? If we're being told we can't even have this debate, Andy McCarthy. We're being told
Right.
It's a religion of love. We're being told by the Republicans, don't touch it, and you're a xenophobe. I don't know what the hell a xenophobe is. I mean, so we're not even allowed to discuss it. I say bullcrap to that.
Yep, and you know who we're hurting the most, Mark, by that? Not just our own national security. The people that we hurt the most are authentic, pro-Western, pro-American, moderate Muslims. Because what they need is for Sharia ideology and Sharia supremacism to be held up to the light of examination, and the ideas that people like the Muslim Brotherhood have to be examined and marginalized in this society. That's the only way that we're going to empower authentic moderate Muslims, which is what we say we want to do. The people who don't want to have the conversation that we're talking about are the left and the Islamic supremacists, because they...
Oh, not just them. I'm sorry, but the Republican establishment doesn't want to either.
No, progressives of all stripes. That's right. But the Muslim Brotherhood and Islamic supremacists are the ones who have a deep interest in not having their ideological system examined by the public. It would actually help authentic moderate Muslims to say, that's what those guys believe, and we don't.
Very quickly, you have decided that you're endorsing Ted Cruz, and you have some difficulty with Rubio's position when it comes to foreign policy and national security and so forth. Would you like to touch on that briefly?
Well, I just think that we have to have an America first foreign policy that doesn't resist intervention when it's in American national interest to intervene, but also doesn't pretend that our enemies are our friends. or that in specifically the case of Syria, that rebels who are run rife with both Muslim Brotherhood and Al Qaeda elements are moderate James Madison's waiting to happen, when in fact that there's Islamic supremacists, and I think we have to learn from what happened in Libya and what happened in Egypt under the Muslim Brotherhood, and try not to have a repetition of that in Syria. That doesn't mean that we can allow Syria to be a safe haven for jihadists. I don't think we should allow any place on the planet to be a safe haven for jihadists. But let's not pretend that our enemies are our friends.
And I'd like to count the number of conflicts and civil wars that the McCain, Graham, Rubio folks would like us to send ground troops into. I mean, this is not a Reagan-esque foreign policy. It's not a conservative foreign policy. It's actually naive and rather radical, don't you think?
I do. Look, I would be much more of a mind to intervene militarily if I thought that we had a strategy that, A, took jihadists out wherever they operate, and B, treated these state sponsors of Islamic supremacism as hostiles instead of phony allies. If I thought we were getting that piece of it right, then I would think that the interventions were smart, because they were going to wipe out national security threats, but not get us bogged down in impossible experiments like trying to turn Kandahar into Kansas.
But it also goes to your point about immigration. It's what's in America's best interest and our national security interests. They're related. So wouldn't we prefer the Shah of Iran, who was no little D Democrat, to the Islamo regime that's in there now? Don't we prefer Sisi to the experiment that Obama was pushing in Egypt? Wouldn't we prefer today Gaddafi, who, as you have pointed out multiple times, the Bush administration supported to a point, to the what now, ISIS and Al Qaeda spreading their reach into that part of the world? I mean, this so-called democracy project. What is a democracy project? To have one vote and you're out?
Yeah, in that region, it's one person, one vote, one time, right? So here's the craziness of it. We don't support Sisi, who has courageously come out and said that we have to fix what's wrong in Islam and we have to discredit this supremacist ideology. We won't support him because the Muslim Brotherhood was ousted and they had been democratically elected. In the meantime, they have the most anti-democratic, anti-liberty program on the planet. So
yeah, they were taking over the country.
Right. And what we're saying is, even if you're an anti-democrat, we'd rather have you, if you're democratically elected, than have somebody who's pro-American and wants to fix what's wrong with radical Islam.
Mm-hmm. Crazy. I mean,
I think so.
That is a process. And by the way, and I've pointed out, and I've written myself, you can't have a democracy without a civil society. It can't function. I don't know any place on the face of the earth where that works.
Mark, we've talked about this before. When I was in the third grade, we had a democratic election. We elected a president, the vice president, treasurer. Everybody knew the nun was still in charge. Right. Just because we had an election and we counted up votes, that didn't turn us into a culture of democracy. And usually, I think that the election is the tail end of the democratic process, because democracy, as you pointed out, is a culture. It's a way of living. It's a way of looking at the world. And counting up the votes is an indicator that you're in a democratic society, but it's hardly the be-all and end-all of it.
Well, great job, Andy McCarthy. I want you all to check out his last post. It's terrific. Trump's Muslim immigration ban should touch off a badly needed discussion rather than trying to shut us all down and shut us all up. Andy McCarthy, thank you, my friend.
Thanks, Mark. Great to talk to you.
You too. God bless, and I'll be right back.